Do you expect any more activity out of Kalani Sitake?
From what we've heard from sources inside the program, it looks like the next transfer time is in May for further signings and everything else before this season. That is supposed to be planned to be a big time. Because evidently, when they do that, there's a lot of people that come in that maybe weren't looking at BYU before, or they go through the spring practices and find out there's no place for them. So it has been very laid back. I've got 5 on my list from December, and the number isn't high. Last year had BYU had 17 or 18 by this time, so it is quite a bit different.
Is that because they're just not making connections, or do you think that's a plan, scholarship limitations that they just aren't able to be that active?
I think part of it is BYU is a unique place. Well, everybody could say that, but we're really unique in the fact that we bring back a lot of missionaries from 2-year program or 2-year missions, and they come in, they come off their missions, they're not in shape, so then they need to figure out if they're going to play this year or next year, and then that dictates how many people actually come in before the season starts.
Did you have many NFL draft decisions that had to be made? That date obviously hit about a week ago, January 15th. So, how did that shake out?
I think we lost 4 or 5 that are going to be estimated to be in the draft eligible. It again, these 2 years, we knew this year and last year we were going to be slower, right? We were going to have a lot of transfers come in, but it's going to take a while for BYU to get its recruiting all the way up where it needs to be. They're still on target to have their best recruiting year ever, and we're having 4 stars are starting left and right from high school. And so I think that by itself really leads everybody to believe the next 2 years are going to be fun.
Best recruiting year ever.
Right. Yeah. Two, Satawala and, I can't remember the other kid's name. They just recently signed at the end of December, and I apologize, I don't have his name for some reason. Both 4 stars out of Utah. So those were huge gets. And at the end of the day, BYU is really working to catch up to Utah in its recruiting.
What do you attribute this success to?
Well, part of it's Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator, who is a master recruiter. And really, most of these signings are on the defensive side. I want to say 10 to 12 are coming in that are new from defense. And that by itself is now a new cornerstone. I think the offense you might see take a little bit of a step back. Certainly, the defense is going to be much improved.
We got Nathan on the line from Big 12 Mafia. What's going on over there on Big 12 Mafia these days?
So we're covering a lot of the bigger news stories. We're talking about FSU, the ACC, a lot of the recruiting and transfer portal for Arizona, Washington, and then Michigan. As you said, Michigan hasn't had any go out, which has been interesting. And then we're covering all the like House versus NCAA. So a lot of the legal disputes and organizational changes that are happening at the very top of college football, the college football playoff. And for us, it's realignment.
So, Nathan, I'm going to conjecture here a little bit that, and maybe I'm missing it because in this NIL era, all previous rules are out the door, but something tells me that, okay, so we're looking at, you mentioned how active Kalani Sitake was last year at this time,
Right.
not so much at this point, at least until maybe after spring practice. But I got to think because of the unique characteristics of the school, the campus, everything involved, as you just mentioned, that maybe a commitment means a little bit more here, and there's going to be less leaving and also more targeted selections outside in the transfer portal than just shooting and gunning for everyone. That once you get a commitment, that individual, that student athlete, had maybe been a little bit more serious about looking over what the situation is there, and so that they're a little bit more firmly committed.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the main thing that Kalani builds, and everybody uses it's trite anymore, but family is really what it is. We We only recruit kids that can come in. BYU has a very high ACT score average, is something like 24 or 25. The average student comes in at 31 or 32 on the ACT. So there's very high educational requirements. On top of that, it is a unique place. There's a lot of things that Utah does or BYU does that Utah doesn't, and that there is a stark comparison between the two. I think what we take away from it this time is that BYU's only lost 4 transfers out. Yes, we've only brought in 5, but look at most programs, they lose between 10 and 20 every transfer portal time. And I think that's probably the biggest mark of Kalani in the way he coaches and recruits.
So if you got quite a bit of hope that 2024 is going to be better than 23?
Well, it's going to have to be if we want to keep moving forward. Absolutely. If we're going to get 6 or 7 wins, we know how difficult that's going to be, especially in this new Big 12. I think we have to. There's no doubt about it. NIL is building at the school. And then I believe that the coaching staff is really bringing in some kids that are high character kids that probably won't transfer out. So if they stay for more than 1 or 2 years, that's a huge win. And that'll really build up BYU's depth.
How is BYU Nation taking to playing Utah every year? No doubt. Don't have to make any more decisions about it. It's locked in the Big 12. And of course, the pairing is the most obvious one in the conference that these two have to play, and that it's going to be a rivalry that's going to be not just on message boards, but it's going to be on the field every year.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. Last game of the year, it's going to be right around Thanksgiving. But the brands of Utah and BYU are arguably 2 of the best in the entire Big 12. And I guarantee you, Brett Yormark's going to lean into that. In my opinion, it's the number 1 rivalry now that we've lost Bedlam. We've lost a few of the other traditional Big 12 schools. And so I think at the end of the day, if they don't sell the heck out of the Holy War, it'll be a major loss. And I don't expect Brett Yormark's going to miss that.
Nathan, how is BYU handling NIL?
Well, what's interesting is they were one of the first groundbreaking NIL programs to actually partner with whole businesses. They would come in and they give the entire team, they would pay for all their schooling if they're not on scholarship. They were one of the first schools to do that. I think now that we're looking at, anywhere from 7 to 10 to 15 million in NIL, it's going to take a while for BYU to get there. So I think you have to build a trust. There's a lot of concerns about what the NIL regulations are going to be anyway. And so people are a little conservative with their money. But I think as trust comes out and more structure gets around NIL, I think it's going to make a big difference, and the trust factor is going to go up a lot. I think, look, we have several $billion graduates. There's no reason why BYU students who haven't gone out into the world, make a lot of money, can't give back. But the struggle is, and you know this just as well as I do, who do you give if you're a major donor? Do you give to like the Cougar Club at BYU, or do you give to an NIL? Do you set up a foundation and only fund NIL out of that and do it tax-free? There's so much regulation that I really think something needs to change, if not at Congress, certainly at the NCAA level, to grab our hands around it and put some more structure in it. Because right now, there's absolutely no rules.
Absolutely. We had a conversation about this, as we do practically every day in some form, but with Tony Siracusa, our guy at Last Word on College Football concerning NIL. And I'd like to dive into it a little bit deeper. And I certainly have my suggestions and guardrails that I think should be placed on it. I in no way want to restrict and put these student athletes in a position that no other American has been in. And that was the former world that they lived in, and not being able to supplement their scholarship in any such way. I don't believe that that's justified. But at the same time, we do need structure desperately in this sport. And this is the most pressing need right now that's facing the sport, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Totally agree with you. Tony Siragusa's show. I love it. And we really appreciate the value he brings to college football and the wider world for exposure and everything. But look, at the end of the day, the NCAA needs to settle. The House versus NCAA is going to determine whether these players might become employees if they become contract workers at the conference level. There's hundreds of good ideas out there, but the ones that we really have held on at our show on Big 12 Mafia is at the end of the day, the players need to get money. And if it's profit sharing, if it's some other method that makes sure that every player that is playing both in college and football and basketball should have some type of NIL money. And we just need more structure. That's all it is to it. At the end of the day, if we can even put in, my idea is a salary cap. Give each school a number that the max they can spend out, and that way we would stop some of these crazy numbers like Rashada's 11 million last year, which was just, or 14 million. That was insane. And he never saw any of that money, moved to Arizona State. And who knows? But right now, there's no contracts, there's no formal commitment, and something needs to change.
Yeah, so the salary cap idea I can get on board with, except for one huge issue, is that as I see it, there can't be a salary cap without being a business. So the
Right.
NFL can institute a salary cap because they're running a business, just
That's
like
true.
if you work down at the grocery store, they, in a sense, have a salary cap. It's called a budget. So they allot 20% or 50% or whatever the percentage is to the salaries and the income and the pay of the employees at the store. And then the better they do, typically they'll hand that a portion of that to the employees. Or if they do worse, either they have a buffer and they don't have to limit pay or decrease anybody's pay. But if business gets so bad, then they obviously then go through layoffs or decrease pay. But basically, the payment to the employees is in direct correlation to how well the business is doing.
Right.
And you would have to, and all this money is coming from private corporations and private donors. So how do you put a cap on that? How do you cap what people are allowed to donate to athletes?
Well, for one thing, it's madness right now.
Yes.
When $15 million at Ohio State to fulfill all their NIL commitments a year, $15 million a year, and then you look at a school like, and I'm just going to throw a cheap one out there. I would say SMU. I'm teasing. SMU is going to have a ton of money, but any other school that doesn't have a lot of backing like that, even getting to 7 to 10 million seems right now kind of crazy. So
Yeah.
it all depends what the vision is at the NCAA for this sort of next level of organization. In my opinion, it's going to be A4, possibly A3 for autonomous. Who knows what's going to happen with the ACC once FSU leaves, and those conference or those schools in those conferences, in my opinion, they should be at a different level. A lot like Charlie Baker brought up. He had some kind of crazy ideas, but I think one of the good one would be is if those four conferences break away, and they don't break away the actual games they play. So you still have BYU playing Boise State, for instance, but those conferences by themselves sort of are a different level on pay, on getting money out to the programs, on all the institutional stuff they can provide, and that would sort add structure to what right now is a lot of chaos. I mean, you brought up some very good points, and I don't know necessarily how the pay scale increases or profit sharing would be managed outside of some sort of a master system that each school had an amount of money, and it's a delicate balance, because you're right, if they make the players employees or they turn it into NCAA football / NFL, then at the end of the day, these schools might lose their tax-free status. You have all kinds of big funds out there that are already paying for these schools to operate, and the athletics is supposed to stay separate. I don't know how they do that. If they make them, that's why I'm not sure about making them employees or making them contract workers. I think it needs to be a system. Maybe contract workers could be used, but at the end of the day, these schools need to be giving these players money and paying for their health insurance and care after they leave college. It's just not fair the way it's worked right now. Something needs to change.
Among other things, the biggest issue I have with NIL is that it's not being operated the way it was intended to be operated. So
Right.
I think back more than 10 years now when there was an issue with Johnny Manziel supposedly signing autographs and getting money back. And then the NCAA suspended him for the first half of a game and then actually admitted that they didn't even prove that he did anything wrong, but they still suspended him for a half a
Right.
game. So we know something was going on. So I produced a video that's 10 years old at this point to say uh, any of us that are American citizens can benefit from name, image, and likeness. We can
Right.
benefit from our celebrity, except for these student athletes. So why can't they? However, we've gone the pay for play route.
Right.
I know that there are some exceptions. I remember as soon as NIL was legalized, that I believe it was Bo Nix down at Auburn had an iced tea deal. And then that's what this is supposed to be. You're supposed to be representing some type of initiative, whether you put your face on a iced tea jug or you do Instagram posts or whatever you're signing autographs down at the local car dealership. There's
Right.
supposed to be some reciprocation for the pay you're receiving, name, image, and likeness, not just you're showing up to play and we're going to pay you this amount of money.
Right. It's really been distorted. And there was this other thing where without the regulations, some people think that it should be tax free. So people can donate to an NIL and they don't have to pay taxes on that money or report it. And it's just completely messed up. You used to have to do a service. What you're talking about specifically is you trade a service for a service. And right now, I think for the most part, none of those obligations are being met. There are some people at BYU, they're really trying to keep their clamp on it. So there is some sort of a trade, but I think it's spinning out of control. And look, at the end of the day, it's untenable the way it's working right now. Without any regulation, without any structure and rules, I just don't know where this ends up. But I'm telling you right now, the NCAA is 5 minutes away from being defunct as far as it comes to football. They have no oversight or control. You have these arbitrary rules. I mean, look, Jim Harbaugh, there's cheating there. They, 3 weeks suspended. I mean, there was no proportionality to any of that. So I don't know how they do it. I mean, there's so many complications, but something has to change. And if they wait for Congress to do it for them, it's going to turn into another tax and revenue source for the federal government.
Well, that suspension of Jim Harbaugh didn't even come from the NCAA. That came from the Big Ten.
Right.
And then the other thing is when you talk about the NIL regulations, now we're seeing, as you just mentioned off the top about what you guys are discussing there at Big 12 Mafia with the Florida State situation,
Right.
the NCAA is now involved in an investigation on the Jaden Rashada situation in Florida, and it may involve another school. And then you've got the Florida State penalty that was handed down. And to your point, there aren't specific guardrails and guidelines and legislation and all of that in place, but the NCAA's there are some, and most of that's linked to what particular state you're operating in. So the NCAA is now starting to investigate, but I think that the restrictions, the guidelines, all that should be put in place and set before we start running around penalizing schools.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it has to start somewhere. So there's baby steps. Nobody's saying it has to happen overnight. Maybe phase it in 3 to 5 years, whatever it is. But right now, the NCAA is toothless. They do these investigations. There's going to be some level 1 and level 2 violations. I mean, basketball, that happens. If your school hasn't had a level 1 violation, I don't know what you're doing and you're recruiting. So it just doesn't make any sense. So whatever they decide, write it on the wall. Everybody sign it in blood underneath it and commit to those things. And then there needs to be specific enforcement mechanisms put in place so that when you have a Rashada incident happening again, everybody knows what that penalty will be. 1 game, a year, 5 years, whatever it is, there needs to be a penalty that people can draw a line from the consequence or action to the consequence, and people are held accountable. That includes coaches. There's lots of things that need to be done, and they just have to decide they're going to start somewhere. Because right now they're throwing their hands in the air, saying, "Congress, please help us, because we can't, we can't do it ourselves," and it's just a mess.
All right, folks, everybody watching us, of course, is hardcore college football fan and probably a Big 12 fan by extension. So we've got a Big 12 channel, so check it out. You see that on the screen. And then more importantly, head on over to Big 12 Mafia and check out Nathan's work. It's right here on YouTube. It's easy to find, Big 12 Mafia. Nathan, appreciate you stopping by, breaking down things for us.
Anytime, Mark. I still got to get you on my show. I apologize that I let things get in my way to inviting you. So we'll have to do that soon.
Absolutely.